All right, everyone. Thank you for sticking around for the last panel of the day. Really appreciate it. Brand Innovators 2023. So, my name is Scott Tilton. I'm the former CEO of HookIt. We've been in sponsorship analytics for a little over 20 years. Really passionate about this topic, sports marketing, sponsorship, data and analytics. And we recently got acquired by Core Software back in January of last year. So we're very focused on sponsorship, measurement. We work with about 1,000 brands and rights holders on measuring and managing sports sponsorships. So just really passionate and love this space. So excited to talk to you guys today, get some insights around the state of the industry of sports, entertainment. And I'm joined by really great brand marketing leaders from TaylorMade, New Balance, and Moneygram. So wanted to get it kicked off with some intros here. You want to kick us off, Ryan?
Hi, my name is Ryan Lauder. I'm from TaylorMade Golf. I'm British. I have a sore throat, so if you can't understand me, just raise your hand. Okay, we're good. I look after media at TaylorMade Golf in Carlsbad, California. Essentially, it's peso, paid, earned, shared, and owned. So advertising, public relations, social media, and content we publish on our website.
Ian Fitzpatrick, American. As much as Boston is. I'm Global Senior Director or something of Brand Strategy and Operations at New Balance. I look after advertising, global creative, global content, global consumer insights, a handful of other such things, whatever's wrong that day, I suppose.
Good group here. I love these guys. I'm David Paro. I'm the head of global sponsorships at Moneygram. And Moneygram is a leading global company that serves in the cross-border transactions and transfer business. We serve over 150 million customers over the last 5 years. And I'm here primarily because I get to overlook a very new Formula One sponsorship that we have endeavored into.
Yeah, this is a great group of brands, really diverse in their portfolio and sponsorship mix. So I want to start with you, David. You just did a major partnership in Formula One, a huge deal for the company, also a huge deal for the North American market. Let's talk a little bit about your new title sponsorship with Haas F1 and how that all came to be.
Yeah, thanks. I think the important thing to do is I have to take a little bit of a step back and talk about the history of Moneygram, because that puts into context why it is that we did the deal. So Moneygram has been around for over 80 years, and we have been helping people send money all over the world for that time, and we've really been a lifeline to immigrants that have to send money back to the country of origin or the people that they love around the world. But over the last few years, we've developed, we've evolved, and in being competitive in the space of moving money, we have evolved into much more of a fintech company. We've used innovation. We are focusing more on the digital market, while at the same time still serving those customers that we always have. So when we put all that and look at where we are as a company, we needed to help tell that story. And it wasn't as though sponsorship was something that MoneyGram has done all that much of in the past, but we really wanted to say, here's where we are now as a company, what's going to help us tell that story? And we really couldn't have found a better property than Formula One, not just because it's super hot right now, but it deals with speed. It's truly is global. It is, in my opinion, the most innovative sport there is that really leans heavily into technology. And we wanted to help tell that story. And my philosophy as a sports marketer has always been one of the main things that sponsorship can do is help define a brand or enhance a brand or help tell a new story about a brand. And we couldn't be happier with this as an association. Now, the next part of that is that what would be the right team if we were going to go the team route? And we think we found a team that not only fits our personality, and it's not just because they're the only American team in the sport. That's a piece of it, but it's not the most important thing. But they were totally relatable. They are like real people that are striving in the world, and we felt they just told our story very, very well. So we're proud to be a partner with the Moneygram Haas F1 team and start this journey in this sport that's just really kind of taking off globally.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think the cool thing about sponsorship and brands is that every brand is unique. All their goals and objectives out of sponsorship deals are also super unique. They're not one size fits all across all these brands. Ian, you've had, with New Balance, you've had a really interesting transition over the last couple of years with your portfolio mix and kind of how you've invested in these different partnerships and sponsorships. Talk to us a little bit about how that's evolved over the years.
Yeah, I think we have a complicated history with sponsorship. We famously said we were endorsed by no one for a long time. A lot of that was born out of actually very early involvement in NBA sponsorship in the early 80s. We put our name behind some athletes whose behavior didn't match our values, pulled out of sponsorship for over 20 years, not counting a handful of runners. I think about our journey in sponsorship and sort of happening in 4 stages, right? So first it was a matter of how do we go and find, I hate talking about people as assets, but I'm going to do that for a minute. Where do we go and find brand accretive assets who share our values that we can afford, right? So if the first phase was about beginning to go and find people who fit this sort of strange, different sort of brand, whose value we could maximize. A great example is something like Kawhi Leonard. Nike had absolutely no idea what to do with Kawhi Leonard, right? He's a complicated guy, complicated story, not on social. For us, it was saying there's a distressed asset there, right? An incredibly decent guy, too. I don't want to talk about him in such a transactional way. But here is somebody whose value we can absolutely maximize and do interesting things with. And that sort of began to set up the second phase of us and re-entering sponsorship. It was, how do we take these people, Francisco Lindor, Sadio Mane, right? Coco Gauff. How do we work with them to maximize their individual value, right? That's things like knowing that what drives engagement for Raheem Sterling and our brand is very different from what drives engagement with Bukayo Saka, even though they both play similar positions in the same sport. Right? Digging into what's going to really drive brand accretive value for us with each one on a case-by-case basis. The third phase, perhaps, is one of looking at the whole portfolio and understanding that the value we create with individual athletes varies across regions, varies across demos, right? Varies across categories. Natively, we tend to be instinctually think as a global org that athletes from a region or of a region are the most valuable in that region. We quickly found that athletes work across regions much more often in counterintuitive ways. So our most effective asset today in Latin America, for example, is a Senegalese footballer who plays in Germany, right? But because of years with Liverpool, Sadio Mane is extraordinarily valuable in Brazil. So begin to understand how influence and brand equity works across categories. And we were able to build some really great custom work with you guys to do that. And then I think the fourth phase of our maturity, and again, we're still embryonic in this compared to so many of our competitors, is beginning to create into brand accretive activity, understanding that the clarity and the visibility, for example, of our marks on Coco Gauff's kit when she's playing in a Grand Slam, and the visibility of that is something you should design into, that literally the footwear and apparel we create has to be maximizing that value as well. So it's been a rapid sort of 4 or 5 year journey working through a set of different phases and approaches to what we're doing.
Switching over to golf here, it's, golf, not to beat up on it, but it's been a pretty traditional sport for a long time and largely centered around the PGA, major events. We've worked together for a long time, and TaylorMade has had a really unique approach in how they've leveraged ambassadors and really had to pivot some of their strategies. How are you guys approaching sponsorship today?
Yeah, so we had an interesting 2022. Actually, hands up in the room, audience participation. Who plays golf in the room? Wow. Oh, okay, all right. I'm going to be careful what I say then, all right. So all of you probably know then, the PGA Tour, Live Golf, let's bring up the elephant in the room here, had a pretty interesting year, and obviously Netflix were following them, if you've seen Full Swing. Not as exciting as Formula One, no one's going to die in golf, no one's swearing in golf, they're all very clean cut. But we actually pivoted in 2022 when guys like DJ or Matt Wolf or Sergio Garcia switched over because we do a lot of social media activations with our athletes. So all TaylorMade golfers combined, like Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy, Colin Morikawa, Scotty Scheffler, Tommy Fleetwood, etc., Nelly Korda, Brooke Henderson for Canada. We have a combined audience of 27 million fans to go at, right? And we realized that when we lose a couple of these guys to activate, because they've joined Live, we had to go out and find new ways of activating other audiences. So we went to ambassadors, paid ambassadors, who are integral and passionate about the sport. So people like Aaron Rodgers, any Packers fans, probably not here in Texas, but Aaron Rodgers, Gareth Bale, just a small audience size of 102 million. Huge golfer, probably it's like golf, Real Madrid, Wales now, probably. I know he's gone from Real. And Catherine Newton. I don't know if you've seen Ant-Man, the new movie. So she's an actress, but she's a scratch golfer. She turned down a scholarship at USC to become an actress. And we're trying to really grow our women's game as well. So we kind of pivoted from the athletes into paid ambassadors. And we have contracts with them. We have service days. And we basically use them in their social space. We track that through Core and HookIt. So we pivoted partly because of what was going on with the athlete situation. But social media for us as a brand in space of golf, trying to create a point of difference with guys like Tiger, Rory, Nelly. We have a huge amount of content we can create. And we're now the number 2 brand in golf in social media in terms of audience size. We're only just behind the PGA Tour now, so and we're going after them, but they're a little bit bigger than us right now.
Yeah, I thought the ambassador strategy that you guys are following, you're treating these guys like athletes, right? And they're compensated like athletes and tracked like athletes and expected to do the same types of things as you're expecting of your paid athletes, right?
Absolutely, and as well as paid ambassadors, we've gone down the YouTube route. So we're trying to look at our audience. So those of you who do play golf, you've got a 65-year-old guy watching the Golf Channel, all the way through to a 14-year-old kid who's following Barstool Sports. And we've got to really make sure we have content, messaging, and a positioning for everybody who plays golf, from like a junior through to a elderly golfer. So we leaned in heavily with the Barstool and the 4Play pod guys, Riggs and team, about 3-4 years ago. And it's a very interesting media partnership because we are, obviously there's content, there's product seeding, there's trial at their Barstool Classics, and then they also buy a lot of golf equipment from us as well. But it's tapping into a new engaged social audience that NBC, CBS, no offense if you're here, can't deliver for us. So we really have evolved as a brand in that real, modern approach to digital engagement with our fan base.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about measurement. We live and breathe by measurement and metrics and KPIs, and really trying to demonstrate and prove the ROI on sponsorship investments. COVID had definitely accelerated a lot of that. If there wasn't pressure to justify returns prior to COVID, that forced it. What KPIs are kind of most critical for you from a sponsorship perspective, and how do you go about measuring them? Let's go to you, Ian.
We've built a handful of our own custom metrics on top of the HookIt data that we have that allows us to track really two metrics. First, we're looking at an overall adjusted version of your ad value that we weight relative to markets. So I'll give you an example of the challenge in that. Joe Root, one of the most famous. Do you know who Joe Root is? Anybody know who any cricket fans in here? Probably not. Joe Root, an enormously famous, valuable sports marketing asset. Enormous number of followers. And if we weight his value through traditional means, we come up with massive numbers. The problem is 90% of his followers are in the Asian subcontinent, where we don't make or distribute product. So we need to go in and layer on top of traditional brand metrics that allow us to weight regionally or by market the value of a particular set of social metrics. The other thing that we're tracking actually much more closely is how much of an ambassador or an athlete's capacity they're using. So what is the kind of value that we projected that we could create when we built that contract, and how well are they performing against that, right? So how much excess capacity? Man, I'm really talking about people in like non-human terms, and I apologize for that. But how much excess capacity is there in a partnership, and how do we work with that person to make sure we're getting as much of that as possible? I care about that even more than I particularly care about really any sort of aggregation or aggregated media dollars.
Yeah, David, you guys are, 5 months into your new partnership, and it's a multi-year deal. How are the goals that you're tracking for this season and this year, how are those shaping up, and how will those evolve and change over the next couple of years?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think anytime you do a sponsorship, you have to constantly be looking not only about what your tactics are going to be and what your activation strategies are going to be, but are you able to achieve the things you're doing, and sometimes adjust what those objectives are. I do want to say one thing though, before, if any of you don't want to watch Full Swing because there isn't swearing in it, he lied. There is plenty of swearing in it. There's a lot of swearing in it. Maybe not as much as Drive to Survive, but a lot of swearing. Okay. So when I talked at the first question, we talked about being able to tell our story and make sure people knew what we were today. So a lot of what we're doing on a global basis is really trying to measure, are we able to communicate that? Obviously, the brand presence, fill the top of the funnel, all those things are there, and we think F1 gives us the opportunity to do that. But we want to make sure that the message, what it is that we really want people to know about us, is resonating. So we're looking at a lot of things in terms of favorability scores and preference scores and all those things. But then the social piece is absolutely, because this is how we engage. I mean, right, this is how people are engaging. Not everybody can be at every race. It's not like there's a hometown, I have a season ticket to go. So we are going to definitely lean very heavily into that, particularly in year one around the social engagement aspect. We certainly, in our key, where we have a digital presence, where people can make transactions on an app. We serve over 200 countries, and not in every country can they do that yet. So those are the places we're going to really lean in on from a in-market activation standpoint. But as we evolve the sponsorship moving forward, obviously there will be, not only our own expectation of what we're doing with the sponsorship, but the pressure to show that we can do that. Driving people into the app, getting people to download the app. But we need to do more than just say, hey, there's an app and we're sponsoring F1. So one of the things we're doing right off the bat is making sure that we have just a constant flow of content that's available not just through social channels, but ultimately, through our app, where people are able to access that, whether that's team information, whether that's media partnerships that we might do that feed us interesting content. We're going to be launching a game in the United States a little later in May that creates an opportunity for us to fast send money to people as they're following the race. That's probably getting a little ahead of myself because we haven't officially announced that yet. So, sorry, Sydney. But we're just really excited about the things that we'll be able to do, because we have millions of people around the world that use this app, and we hope there will be a lot more. And we need to deliver something. We have to show them the value of our investment in this property, which I think is another important thing you need to do with sponsorship.
Yeah, the Drive to Survive and Full Swing has come up a couple of times, but we actually call it the Netflix effect on Formula One. When we started tracking the impact on social around Formula One a couple years ago, the social engagement and the follower base is like more than doubled in the last 3 years, specifically because of Drive to Survive. It's kind of remains to be seen whether Full Swing will be able to have that same type of impact, but it's obviously really helped the sport, and it's been incredibly important. So switching gears to social media, that's also been kind of threaded throughout a lot of our discussion topics here. How critical is it to each of your brands from an importance perspective of really activating your sponsorships? Go, Brian.
I wouldn't say it's the first priority for us, but it's certainly in the top one. It's a famous Brian Clough quote. I don't know if you remember that. That was for you, exclusive for you. We're about 4 million social fans in terms of like just TaylorMade, but it's so big that we look at social. It's clearly it's a leased audience, right? You don't own these fans. if TikTok was to be banned tomorrow, we just lost 300,000 fans, right? So we have to be careful here. So we're trying to grow through social because it's the point where people are accessing content, consuming content. But what's more important to us is really audience development. It's an owned audience. So that means an email, a mobile phone number. So we're a consumer-facing brand. We're very lucky that we have assets like Tiger Woods, Rory McIlroy, etc. So we can really lean in heavily on using these assets to really drive people to come and follow TaylorMade. So we're really looking at owned media and owned audiences is what we think in the next 10 years is going to be the most valuable currency when it comes to marketing, because we have a direct in to that golfer. So audience development actually has been a huge part of TaylorMade over the last 3 or 4 years. It's actually now as part of our bonus package as a company. So it's a part, it's not all of it, but it's like a small part. But it just shows you how important it is to a company like ourselves on the consumer side. Anybody from Callaway here, please? I have a Men in Black pen. I'll just take and zap you later. But yeah, audience development has just been huge for us. So yeah. We go back 5 years, we had one person on social media and probably one person in content. We've now got 20 in 5 years. We now have 10 people doing content and 10 people in the media team doing earned media, social, writing for our website, doing YouTube content, etc. So if you're a consumer-facing brand, I would really deploy you to lean in on audience development. It will pay off in 10, 15 years to come.
Any interesting campaigns, Ian, that you guys have put together from a social perspective?
I tend not to think so much about our owned social channels. They matter, obviously. Listen, every consumer journey you're ever going to see for footwear and apparel starts in social in 2023. So it obviously matters a ton for us. I tend to think about our own platforms third. I tend to think about the athletes' platforms second. Where I actually start with typically is where do our athletes intersect with, in fact, other brands and platforms. So a huge moment for us last year when, and I'll name drop a little bit, when Bukayo Saka showed up in the Aimé Leon Dore lookbook on Instagram, that did magnificent things for him and for us. And it's our job, I think, to put our partners, our ambassadors, in a position to work with the full spread of our partners, grow the entire ecosystem. So for us, we have creative partners, whether those are stores like Aimé Leon Dore or other brands like Oralee or take your pick, that we're working with. And our job is to continue not to expand that, but to cross-pollinate that ecosystem so that our athletes who want to show up in Prada, right? So now they can show up with Miu Miu and New Balance, which they've never been able to do until recently. To build ecosystems predicated on driving different social platforms and different brands, if you think about these things together, rather than simply trying to maximize our own. And that's been by far the most effective approach for us.
Yeah, so we didn't talk a ton about measurement just yet, but sponsorship is so complex because you've got all these different channels of value, different ways to activate. You've got television, you've got broadcast, social, digital, print. Frameworks are becoming a really important thing these days in terms of how do you pull all that together and come up with consistent metrics and KPIs that you can communicate across your own organization, across all your different partners. Let's talk a little bit about some of the struggles with getting a framework in place that can be adopted by your organization. Whoever wants to tackle that one first can go.
Well, I think there are obviously, just as you said, there are various challenges to that because everybody comes at it from a different mindset and what they expect. And the other thing that gets crazy about sports is then you have everybody just being into it from the fan standpoint. And as brand marketers, you got to try to avoid that aspect. We know people like it. That's why we're doing it, and that's the connection that we're trying to make. For instance, the F1 season kicked off in Bahrain this past week. Moneygram Haas F1 team didn't have a particularly great race, and a lot of people are disappointed in that. But it's like that's not why we're doing this. That's not why we're doing this. But yeah, and with a new sponsorship and one of this significance, I think getting that framework right and then being able to tweak it and get the buy-in and making sure all the people that are the stakeholders in that and understanding it is good. So the people that are executing the work and the agencies that are supporting your business are able to kind of go and tackle that against a consistent set of objectives. But when sponsorships and partnerships are new, sometimes those challenges really are real because you're trying to test and learn a lot of things and guiding. We do a pretty good job, I think, of setting a fairly, I don't want to say simple, but streamlined, here are the couple things we want to do, make sure everything we're doing against that is fitting against that, or be able to tell us this is what it's going to do. Not everything is going to work the first time you try it, but the ability to be able to say this is why we did it, and we're able to fix it or change or tweak or whatever the case may be and adjust as we talked about earlier, I think ends up getting important. But yes, setting the larger framework is real fun part of the job, right? Sometimes a challenge internally.
Yeah, Ian, when we first started working together in 2016, I think your framework was a spreadsheet. How has that evolved?
It still is a spreadsheet. I mean, sort of. It's just a better spreadsheet. Listen, the challenge is converting counting stats to something of meaningful value that allows an organization to say, to operate in a world in which you've got a zero-sum budget. I'm moving money out of paid media into sponsorship. I'm making commitments on a multi-year level, and leadership is asking to understand, is this the best use of finite spend, right? Should we be jumping out of team sponsorships and into individual, or should we be jumping out of individual sponsorships and putting that into top of funnel, far more measurable, traditionally, media? We've worked really hard internally, this is what the spreadsheet does, to try to ascribe a meaningful, rational dollar value to a complex set of metrics. Other than that, otherwise we're just chasing engagement numbers, which candidly don't mean shit to us. But being able to tie kinds of engagement to certain scores that we're able to get through HookIt, to a geography map, to be able to build models from that into conversion against specific products, specific moments, we think we have a pretty workable model that allows us to play dollar for dollar across different kinds of investments we can make. Until you can do that, it gets really hard to sustain and re-up those contracts. At least I've found it's incredibly hard unless we're able to demonstrate that it has true sustainable, that it builds brand equity in a way that we can measure and see. I don't know how useful that was as an answer.
Yeah. And then, just from the TaylorMade side, we're both a direct business where we sell, directly to consumers through our website. But we also have, 80%, 95%, 80, 90% of our business goes through traditional retail. And you try and get any kind of like measurement, metric, sell-through, attribution, or any shape or form, it's very, very hard. So clearly attribution is the holy grail. Everyone's trying to get there as much as they can. But we've also, beyond social, which we're doing a pretty good job on tracking social, the value and things like that, it's things like linear TV and streaming. So anybody here buying linear or buying streaming and struggling to get streaming data from the partners because they're worried that you're not going to buy linear anymore? So, and they're hiding it from us. They're hiding it. So we actually, last 2-3 years before COVID, leaned in heavily on streaming. But the challenge then becomes on a metric and measurement is the C-suite or your executives ain't watching it. They're watching linear. And they're like, where are we? I said, we're in front of the golfers, trust us. We're in front of the golfers. You might not see all the creative, but I'm sure plenty of the brands out there have some of those issues that the CEO's not seeing everything, then we're not doing anything, kind of thing. So which is why measurement and metrics becomes very important, benchmarking and things like that. So, but yeah, we're on the pursuit for attribution through our direct business as much as we can. And just a little shout out to my colleague here, Derek, on the front row, who runs our My TaylorMade Plus app business, and that has a lot about engagement, attribution, and really connecting with the golfer every day of the week. So we're trying to cover all bases as much as we can.
I think we're probably at time. I wasn't really keeping track, but one last question. So, and then we can open it up for some questions. But one of the big trends that we're hearing right now, I was on a workshop last week, and their brands are getting pretty frustrated or fatigued on what they're calling deal stuffing. So specifically when they're working with teams and leagues where they've got kind of pre-packaged sponsorship deals with a whole bunch of benefits that might be irrelevant to you as a brand. And they're looking for more flexibility and partnerships. Like the quote that came out from Oracle was, rights holders, meaning teams or leagues, are set up to sell sponsorships, they're not set up to sell partnerships. So how have you guys approached this with your bigger investments in terms of going after like true partnerships and getting the benefits that you actually want? Yeah, go for it.
Well, the idea of this concept is one that's kind of been around a while, but the pressure on those that are selling properties is high, right? Their ownership is constantly saying, I want 20% more revenue out of the sponsorship department. And so they're creating inventory that I'm not saying meaningless to everybody, but probably meaningless to a lot of people, and trying to sell it. So that's what you mean by, kind of just stuffing these sponsorships with things that don't matter that much. The best sponsorships or relationships or partnerships, whatever you want to call them, come when both needs are met, right? And from a brand side, and we all come from the brand side now, is what am I trying to achieve? It doesn't matter what you have to sell unless you can help me achieve what I want to achieve. So I think that tends to be the way that those things come together best. Now, in the case of us, it was Moneygram and Moneygram Haas F1 team. It was a nice mix at the right time. We wanted to tell the story. The right connection was made. The fit was there, and it worked. And we feel very good about their commitment to helping us achieve our goal. And that's where the dialogue has to happen, that it just can't be, here are the assets and contractually you get this, and then at the end of the year, they're saying, listen, we delivered that stuff, therefore the sponsorship, because it doesn't matter. That's meaningless when it comes to a sponsor, because all we care about, and these gentlemen have both said this, it's what am I being able to show that we were able to achieve, and it doesn't have value to us in us moving our product or building our brand.
I think a lot about how these things work in combination. I'm sure you guys have to do the same thing. I can extract, I'm talking about people like they're boxes again. We can get a lot more value out of a deal with Kawhi because we've built an NBA partnership as well. Our Liverpool partnership years ago allowed us to get way more value out of the Sadio Mane deal, for example, right? So looking at most of what's stuffed in there, moderately ancillary to what we're trying to do. But often what they're looking to sell us is tangential to the real goal, which is the ability to maximize our ability to unlock other significant investments. Every one of our NBA deals gets better because we have an NBA deal. Every investment we just made in Shohei Ohtani is unlocked by our MLB deal in newer, bigger ways, right? And so the trick for us, at least, is figuring out how to play those in combination.
Yeah, well, thank you guys. I think we're going to open it up to questions.
I think we have time for one question. One or two.
Better be a good one.
Can't suck.
Anyone?
Hi. I'm curious, what are some hardships that you have in marketing in non-English speaking countries, and how your strategy kind of changes to combat those hardships?
Yes, so from TaylorMade front, we are a global business. US is number one, Japan is number two, Europe is number three, Korea is number four. We have regional teams in all of those major cities. So we try and create a little bit of a blueprint of how things are working in the Western markets, in Europe, Canada, and US, but then say, hey, you've got to have like an ambassador or an athlete or something that really is going to really mean a lot of things to you guys in those markets. So we try to be as global as we possibly can. The product is very consistent. The athletes are very consistent. The tours are very consistent. But we clearly know that, for example, email is not going to work in Korea. It's Kakao Talk. So we know that they've got to have marketing personnel in each one of these markets to take a lot of the global positioning and branding and sponsorship opportunities, and then give them the freedom to go out and actually do what they need to do and then report back. So we have a very sort of like distributed sort of like plan with these regions, and yeah, support them as much as we can.
Great.
I was going to add that I think social data is an incredible tool for unlocking a lot of the nuance in what fandom and followership looks like. I'll give you, I used the Mane example earlier. I'll give you a couple others. Shohei Ohtani is massively relevant in a number of markets, right? Doesn't need to speak English to do it, right? I mean, he instantly doubled our value in Japan, our commercial value there, as soon as we signed him. Or an ambassador of ours like IU, who's Korean, massively popular across markets that are nowhere near Korea, but incredibly valuable, and getting to their social follower data, partnering with them to understand the true reach of their fandom, lets you stop thinking like a brand that works linearly, and lets you start connecting to a consumer who cares far less about those countries and those borders than I think people, at least my age, grew up thinking they did.
The only thing I'll add to that, from our standpoint, is that we have an asset that we communicate, and the sport of F1 does tend to be communicated in English. If you look at the broadcast. However, what we do, and the first two races of the year are in Middle Eastern markets, is we lean very heavily into our local markets and the agencies there, and make sure we can take the asset we have and how are we going to connect with the customers there and work our plans based on that.
Well, thank you guys. Really appreciate you guys coming out. We got Southern California, Boston, New York, and thank you all for staying today. So appreciate it.
Yeah, great. Thanks,
Thank you.
guys. Thank you.